Canada's Prime Minister stepped up to the podium today, and in less than 1 hour, he rewrote America's four-year strategy. According to Reuters, Canada has already moved more than $180 billion in investment commitments away from US-linked supply chains since early 2024. But today wasn't just another announcement. Today, Mark Carney told the world, on camera, Canada's future is no longer tied to Washington's decisions. And for the first time in decades, a Canadian Prime Minister said it without hesitation, without apology, and with numbers that America cannot ignore. Before we continue, you're watching Maple States, Canada's most trusted newsroom for fact-driven analysis. If you value calm, detailed reporting, make sure to subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing verified news to Canadians everywhere. What unfolded in Ottawa looked like Budget Day, but it wasn't. Within minutes, everyone understood this was something far bigger, an economic declaration of independence. Carney spoke quietly, but every sentence landed like a geopolitical shockwave. He began with a simple phrase, "It's official," but the tone, steady, confident, final, made it clear that the era of waiting for American approval had ended. For years, Trump's administration relied on unpredictability as leverage. Tariff warnings, sudden policy shifts, blunt threats on social media that sent markets spinning. Washington believed chaos would force Canada to bend. Analysts in both countries assumed Trump's tactics were strategic, that they would keep Ottawa cautious, dependent, hesitant. But today proved all those assumptions wrong. Because while America played the tariff game, Carney was building something entirely different, a full national pivot, piece by piece, policy by policy, until Canada no longer needed the very leverage Trump believed he controlled. And the first sign of this shift came through a project Carney described with almost surgical precision: Build Canada Homes. At first glance, it sounds like housing, but the numbers show something else entirely. A federal entity that uses public land, factory-built construction, and competitive national financing to cut building times by 50%, reduce costs by 20%, and lower emissions by 20%. Those figures aren't speculation. They come directly from internal government modeling reviewed by the Globe and Mail. But this isn't about houses. It's about building an economic ecosystem that no longer relies on American lumber, American investment, or American manufacturing inputs. For decades, Canadian industries waited for U.S. capital to trickle north, for U.S. supply chains to open, for U.S. politics to stabilize. That model is now dead. Carney made that clear when he reminded the country that Canada's earliest trade networks, from indigenous nations to voyageurs, existed long before the United States had even expanded beyond St. Louis. It wasn't a history lesson. It was a warning. Canada has built a continental economy before, and it can do it again. Then came the policy that made economists stop taking notes and start rereading their screens: the Buy Canadian directive. Not a slogan, not a campaign line, a structural shift in how every federal dollar moves. Carney announced that every major infrastructure project, every government department, every procurement pathway, every crown corporation would now default to Canadian suppliers, not as an option, as the starting point. Rail, Canadian steel. Housing, Canadian materials. Defense, Canadian manufacturing. Infrastructure, Canadian firms. For decades, U.S. companies quietly dominated these sectors. Many weren't partners. They were the backbone of Canada's supply chain. Today, Carney essentially turned off that pipeline, because if Canada isn't buying American materials, the threat of tariffs becomes meaningless. You cannot threaten to cut off what someone has already stopped needing. But Carney didn't stop at supply chains. He turned to the global implications and to industries that are deeply tied to American markets. A journalist asked about New Brunswick's forestry sector: $2 billion in exports, 75% going directly to the United States. Under Trump's current trade posture, those exports are at risk. It was the perfect moment for political panic. Instead, Carney delivered one of the clearest, calmest strategic answers seen in a Canadian press room in years. He listed 3 pathways: expand Buy Canadian, diversify internationally, and innovate within forest-based products. Not one of those options involved pleading with Washington. And then he added the line that revealed his entire strategy. If the US wants something from Canada, and they do, then access for Canadian forestry becomes something America must trade for. That is economic leverage. Not through confrontation, not through retaliation, through options. Trump believes tariffs create power. Carney believes self-sufficiency creates power. And today he showed why one approach collapses and the other endures. He then addressed the larger truth behind everything Canada is doing. This, he said, is a radically different U.S. trade policy than anything we've seen in our lifetimes. He repeated it for emphasis, because the NAFTA world Canadians grew up with, predictable, cooperative, mutually beneficial, no longer exists. Trump changed the rules. Carney is simply refusing to play by them. And that refusal comes with scale. Carney announced a national plan involving $1 trillion in combined public and private investment across housing, rail, manufacturing, clean energy, artificial intelligence, and national infrastructure. According to Bloomberg, this shift would make Canada one of the largest industrial investors per capita in the G7. He delivered it not as a dream, not as a political promise, but as a blueprint already in motion. And the message was unmistakable. Canada is not fighting the United States for scraps. Canada is building something larger, an economy that cannot be cornered, threatened, or shaken by anyone outside its borders. The moment that defined the day came when Carney leaned slightly into the microphone and said quietly, "At its core, these are things we don't have to ask permission for. We control them. We decide. It's our future." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't point fingers. He just stated it plainly, as someone who understands that the strongest form of power is calm certainty. And then he added a sentence that will echo for years. We will spend less time talking about what the Americans might do, and more time building what Canadians will do. That is not a comment about policy. It is a comment about identity, about a nation refusing to let another country define its choices. Trump's strategy only works on countries that fear losing access. Today, Carney showed that Canada isn't afraid of that anymore. Housing built at home, infrastructure built at home, manufacturing revived at home, new markets opened abroad, domestic capability replacing decades of dependency. Trump created the instability, Carney built the alternative. And that is why today will be remembered as the moment a Canadian Prime Minister stood in front of cameras and ended America's leverage over Canada without firing a single shot. This is Maple States. Stay with us, because this story is only beginning.